I'm Nelson Aspen with my co-host Alexandra Boyd, and we're wrapping up season 1 of Titanic Talk. When we started this little podcast, we had no idea it would be so well received, to our happy surprise, or that we would do so many episodes. And in light of the recent tragic events, we do want to address them because our entire first season had been recorded prior to the loss of the Titan submersible. So we did want to, for our season finale, acknowledge it, address it, and have a little bit of a Titanic talk about it. Alexandra, where do we begin with this?
Well, first of all, we have to acknowledge the families and the loss of the people on board Titan. It's a dreadful tragedy. It's a huge blow to the deep diving community, as they've all mostly now spoken out, and also some kind of recognition to the exploring element of human curiosity that will continue to be fascinated by Titanic, as we are above the waterline, and as many people are in a very small tight-knit community below the waterline. And you know what, I think what we want to sort of pass through is why anyone would want to dive so deep as to get to a place where they're endangering their own lives.
Well, I've always been fascinated with archaeology. I've certainly been fascinated when Dr. Ballard found the wreck in 1985. As I talked about in your documentary, Ship of Dreams, Titanic Movie Diaries, I put my hand up to the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute and was like, I'll do anything to get aboard that exploratory vessel. It never occurred to me that there would actually be submersibles that would go down that far. At this point, it was just,
For you,
finding
I mean,
it.
for the explorer,
Yeah,
for
for me.
the educated, experienced mariner or deep sea diver, but not Joe Public.
Right. And it's kind of, you sort of understand the Elon Musk, Richard Branson spirit of further, deeper, faster, higher, however, pushing the limits. I've never been that much of a limits pusher, but I have been an avid museum goer my whole life, and I've never had an ethical problem looking at a mummy's sarcophagus. I've never had an ethical problem looking at mummified remains from a volcano disaster. So, but what is it? I mean, that's the interesting. What is it about Titanic? Is because it's so romanticized in pop culture? Is it because it's actually not that far back in time? So we do still feel connected to it. But I do feel personally some ethical concerns that, okay, enough is enough. How many more lives need to be lost, in addition to the shipbuilders who perished and the 1,500 on board, that we say, okay, we have the ability to do this virtually. Let's stop going down there. But
And they have just done it virtually. There's this digital twin that's just come out with these exquisitely detailed images of the ship. Like, I've only seen tiny little schematics of, little 360 roving around the wreck, but I can't imagine more detail. And if you're looking through a very thick plexiglass 21-inch wide porthole, how much are you really going to experience when there must be distortion, and then there's the distortion of the water and the light, and there's no light down there. I agree. I think, and especially with digital innovations, we can experience so much virtually. And Titanic Honor and Glory, we interviewed James Penker, who's the creative director of this group of digital animators who have recreated the entire exterior and interior of the ship. I don't think they're quite finished yet, but they're on the road to giving us a completely virtual experience of walking up and down the grand staircase.
We don't even go to the supermarkets anymore. Why do we need to go to the bottom of the ocean? I don't know. This is a fascinating debate. It's also, from our Titanic Talk podcast point of view, we've had so much fun over the course of nearly 24 episodes or whatever it's been, having fun. And the people immediately reached out to us when the submersible tragedy happened, waiting for us to comment on it. And I was like, given the the spirit of our podcast, I think it would have been a mistake to comment too quickly to something that's now going to live forever on the internet. We needed to digest it, form some thoughts about it, and open it up to our community. We are a community of other Titanic enthusiasts, and I think as we take our pause before season 2, that we should solicit to our interested viewers to weigh in the comments, reach out to us through the Titanic Talk podcast page, and that's how we're going to build up our guest list for season 2, I think.
Yes, and I think there will be more discussions to come, because there's more as they bring up the wreckage of the Titan. There will be more evidence, there will be more stories, there will be more known about what happened. That's the problem, isn't it? It's very dangerous to speculate, especially last week when they hadn't found the wreckage. It's very dangerous to speculate on something that still is unfolding and still could bring new stories to light.
And yet proves that the interest, not just our interest, but the public's interest in Titanic is never going to go away. We're going to go away for a quick little hiatus, but and now the next thing that's going to come up in this episode is something we recorded where we take a look back at some of our favorite moments over the first season of Titanic Talk. So if there's something you folks out there didn't catch the first time or want to go back and revisit, of course, we have everything archived for your listening and viewing pleasure, viewing on YouTube, listening on all the other platforms. And my dear friend Alexandra, we've been friends for decades now. Isn't that amazing that Titanic has brought us full circle together? And I love chatting with you, and it's even on different coasts, it keeps us close.
Indeed it does. Enjoy the overview.
Titanic Talk with Nelson Aspen and Alexandra Boyd. Here we feature stories from the independent documentary Ship of Dreams Titanic Movie Diaries and everything else to do with the iconic ship. From James Cameron's epic groundbreaking movie to the history and legacy of Titanic herself. Join us and our special guests as we continue the 25th anniversary celebrations of Titanic. This is your first-class ticket to everything aboard the Ship of Dreams.
It's so sad to have to. It's not goodbye. It's so long. My name is Nelson Aspen. Welcome to Titanic Talk, to the 25th episode of the podcast Titanic Talk. Before we take a little summer hiatus, my co-host, we conceived this together because she is so talented, and it's all spawned by her beautiful documentary, Ship of Dreams, Titanic Movie Diaries, filmmaker and actress Alexandra Boyd. Alexandra, can you believe we've done 25 episodes?
I can't, actually. And just thinking through the generosity of everybody's time and their stories, the personal stories, all connecting to this amazing ship, whether it be the film or the films that have been made or the numerous documentaries or the books that have been written or the experience that the actors had and the fans are my favorite. They're keepers of the flame.
And the new friends we've made. I mean,
oh my gosh.
It's the magic of the internet. I'd like to believe that when they conceived the internet, back when Al Gore decided to invent the internet, that it was with the intent.
I didn't know. I'm not
sure. There was a famous thing where he took credit for it, 25 years ago or something. But the fact that our social network, the way it has just over the course of these 25 episodes, and the one guest leads to the next guest, and it started with your documentary. Of course, we started out interviewing folks from your documentary to get extra details from them,
well,
and all of a sudden,
there's so much more to their stories than we could showcase in the film. That's
right. And I've got our list of our 25 episodes, and you said the fans have a special place in your heart. We started out mostly talking to actors, and then all of a sudden we got into historians and authors and all that stuff. But let's talk about let's start with the actors. Like Liam Toohey who is in your documentary and was famous as the baker. He was so engaging and telling us stories. And you've known him for 25 years.
Well, yes, this is the other thing too. You know, you meet somebody on a job 25 years ago, and it's just so easy to slip back into chatting with them because you're always connected by that job. And I think for Liam playing the baker, who was such a significant character himself, because you know he famously was quite drunk and was baking things for people while
the baker
sinking.
Not
Yes, sorry, not Liam himself. No, clarification. But he had a lovely moment where he was able to feature a hip flask that had belonged to his father circa, you know, early 1900s. So James Cameron let him use it in the film. But I think what I'm trying to say is that because he played Chief Baker Jochen, he is well known by all of the historians and the people who know that character, how he famously got very drunk and baked all the goods for people to feed them while, you know, they didn't know what was going to happen. And so, and then of course he's right there at the very end on the poop deck next to Kate and Leo as the ship descends. So he gets wonderfully featured and gets to talk about it all the time. Yes.
And how featured was Amy Gaipa, of course, playing Trudy Bolt, who you know was the maid to Rose DeWitt Bucator's family, and she, you know, the thing I loved about talking to Amy, it was not only her stories and memories of Titanic, but who she is now. She's she has turned into this real character, but such a formidable instructor, and I don't. She's just somebody I really like.
Well, she's a director as well, a director and a writer. So she and I have trodden very similar paths. But listening to her talk about, not only was this her, you know, her first movie, it was her first job. So she had to really step into line very quickly once she got onto set.
And does it so beautifully. Talk about the stunt work, and you recreated some of the stunts from Titanic in your documentary, specifically including Trudy's famous slide down the deck, presumably to her demise. Although we never saw her go underwater. So although we do know she demised, because then we saw her in heaven, quote unquote
yes,
heaven.
all of those characters around this grand staircase in the heaven scene are the ones that we've seen or know to have perished, along with Jack. No, there's a sort of story about Amy's bloomers that I searched for on eBay for the stunt reenactments, because you know we couldn't use huge chunks of the film. We've used tiny bits. And some behind the scenes stuff. So we recreated in a rather analog way, which actually I like very much. You can see the green screen, you can see all the mechanics of what the actors experienced. And that was done by a lovely group of young stunt people in Atlanta. So I got to spend.
And the beautiful, beautiful artwork by Dale McCarthy that also gave us suggestions from the film. And one of the ones I liked the best was Rebecca Klingler, aka Mother at Stern, and so fun to talk to her and get her recollections. I especially loved that she determined that she was not an American. I remember when she was talking about, you know, her character, she wasn't given much to work with, but when it came time to develop an accent, she said, well, I couldn't possibly be American because of affording the passage of this trip. An American would have gone back and forth, and she wouldn't have been able to afford that. I don't know. I found her fascinating, and you did the courtesy and fun thing of bringing her to one of my shows in Los Angeles. So I've seen her performance for 25 years, and you brought her to come see mine. And you've stayed in touch with her pretty regularly over the course, or no, yes. just reunited for the documentary?
Well, what happened after, 1996, and then we sort of all lived through 97 and the huge success of the film, and then the Oscars. And then a bunch of us got together to write down our diaries, our personal experiences. So the experience of the film went, quite a way after shooting the film. And then you go on, you have a career, you do lots of other different things. And coming back again together for the film was was just like a reunion. It was, and you know, actors, it feels like no time has passed at all. You're like, it just feels the same. It's very fun.
Indeed. And I found Linda Kearns. Linda Kearns was so elegant. You know, I've been looking at her for 25 years as third class woman with the dead eyes, and then to get to have her on the podcast and see her in your documentary, she's so elegant. She's such I just loved her. I loved her story, and the great controversy. The contact lenses she wore for dead eyes were supposedly meant for Leo, but you know, we you know, that's the great trivia question now. Were Leo's eyes closed or open?
You can see what the answer is. I researched it and I snuck it into our YouTube version, so you have to see.
And now Gary DeLellis, an actor.
He had the most wonderful job. I think he had the most stamina. He was a stand-in literally for hours and hours while they lit a scene or worked out where the camera was going to be, which can literally take hours. And then he'd be like, right, stand out, here comes Leonardo DiCaprio, and he would stand and Leo would take his place. He had some amazing.
It's a very difficult job, and it puts the stand-in. But you also have to have a strong sense of self to have to go for hours on end, standing there and working with the crew, and then when it's time to actually roll the camera, you're out.
Get lost. I think he had a great time, and he tells some great stories about working with Kathy Bates and Kate and Leo. What we found is wonderful insights and stories that don't get told by the movie stars of a production. These are people who have been holding on to these stories for 25 years. And now, you know, we're pulling back the curtain of their experiences. And I'm really proud of that fact, because it's
and one actor who you hadn't reconnected with, who I coincidentally knew socially myself, he and his wife, James Lancaster, who of course was the priest helping people cope with their imminent demise as the ship was taking its final plunge. And the podcast with him, that was one of our most surprisingly emotional episodes.
Moving. So moving. And I remember when he wrote it, and he had just, you know, he said, this is what happened. I had just come back from my father's funeral in Ireland. And he read it out loud in my living room with everybody there, and there was not a dry eye in the house. And here we invite him onto Titanic Talk and ask him to read it again. It's a very short diary, and all the same emotions are right there.
He was moved, and so were we.
Oh my gosh! Yes, that's a must listen, that one.
So many stories that are interesting and personal, and you know, we've always been musing about James Cameron as the director, and he has a bit of a reputation himself, but everyone, yourself included, has marvelous things to say about him, and of course, and the experience as well. When talking to Derek Lee, the Stoker stuntman, it was funny because he talked about coming, not to blows, but coming to loggerheads. I think would be the expression with the director.
Well, because it was a miscommunication as well. You imagine this huge film set with all these extras running around. You've got he's cutting a rope. So, well, I'll play it. You listen to the story.
It was a little bit rocky at the beginning.
How so?
There's a scene, well, that's in the film as well, where one lifeboat, and apparently this is true, Frederick Barrett saved a load of people underneath the one
right,
coming down on top of another, and he cuts these ropes, they're called the falls apparently, and he cuts the falls. So this scene was coming up, I don't know, 2 days prior to that. There was another scene where someone had to cut a rope, and he got absolutely roasted by James Cameron because he wasn't doing it, he wasn't putting the energy in, he didn't believe it. And I've heard this and I thought, oh God, we've got this scene coming up. So we're all in the lifeboat, and we've got the other lifeboat coming down. Obviously that's all rigged and it's not going to go anywhere, but it is moving, and I've got these ropes. There's a pontoon with about 5 or 6 cameras He's giving me all these directions. You see it coming, you realise you've got a knife, you stand up, no one else is doing anything, and I'm going, right. I see it coming, I realise I've got a knife, I stand up, and then you start cutting the falls. So I'm right, okay, here we go. And he loved the microphone. Here we go, rolling. 3, 2, 1, action. Got a knife, jump up. Now I'm like, right, I'm going to cut these falls. He ain't going to have a go at me. And I've heard, and I'm cutting even faster. Not like that. The next thing, I look up and he's standing there going, what the hell are you doing? What are you doing? I went, I was cutting the fall. He said, no, I was saying cut. And I said, well, I thought you meant cut. He said, when you see me throw my headphones on the floor, what does that mean? I said, well, I can't look at you, or else I'll be looking down the lens of the camera. And he's like, and that was the moment where he sort of, and I thought, oh, Jesus Christ, I'll be on the next plane home. But after that, he was absolutely brand new.
Now, sometimes you get a dynamic duo, and I'm not talking about Kate and Leo. I'm talking about Judy and Ellen.
Oh my gosh. I love Judy and Ellen so much. They're two of my faves. Because again, they have so many stories because they were there on set longer than any of us. They were from
and all over the ship.
And they were in the water. They were on the poop deck. They were in the third class dance scene. Ellen famously is the frozen lady with the dead baby, and Judy has herself her own diary that she published in a book. If you want to be an extra on anything, read this book because it tells you anything and everything that you can expect. I don't think they expected at the beginning to have to do stunts, but they did lots of stunts, and they aren't stunt ladies, but they are now.
But they certainly spent a lot of time in the water. Some actors that are not either in the documentary or in James Cameron's Titanic, but are enjoying unbelievable success here in New York City off Broadway in the smash hit spoof musical Titanic. We got to chat with Ty Blue and Courtney Bassett. The show has been winning all sorts of awards. It's been extended into 2024. And for people who don't know what Titanic is, it's basically a Celine Dion tribute show. So yes, of course, my heart will go on. But it's set in James Cameron's Titanic film, so there's some it's beyond explanation. You can look on YouTube to see Titanic clips, but it was so much fun to talk to Ty and Courtney about how they've taken the Titanic as we know it from the film and exploited it and spoofed it to such high camp fun.
Yes, and we talk about, obviously there's a reverence there, but also we are still allowed to have comedy, I think. Are we just about?
So well, yeah, I mean, and isn't it funny, you say about comedy, and in the Titanic legacy, we sort of, when we talk about romance, and I'm not just talking about Titanic 1997, but just overall in the Titanic legacy, the Strausses have come to represent monogamy, devotion, romance, the couple that would not be parted. But the comedy, Molly Brown has always been the comic relief. Even in the version where, was it Thelma Ritter that played the Molly Brown-esque character? They didn't call her Molly Brown, but she was sort of the Molly Brown-esque character, if I'm remembering it correctly. But regardless, Molly Brown was always kind of the comic relief because she was bawdy and she was new money. So comedy has its place, and certainly in Titanic, the iceberg itself is a character. So there's.
I wish I'd seen it. I can't wait to see it when I come.
It will probably still be running when you come to New York. So it's a brilliant show. I mean, it's the kind of show that could be done on cruise ships. It could tour. I mean, it can be done anywhere because there are so many Titaniacs, which is our word for Titanic fans, and some of our most memorable episodes, and I might add, most highly rated episodes have been thanks to the Titaniacs. Let's start with Dale and Ilka, who were in your documentary. Tell me
Yes.
about your friendship, because we have become friends with them. We spend a significant amount of communicative time with them off camera.
Yes, and I think, I mean, I've had a very brief brush with fame when I was on a show in the UK about 12 years ago, and there's always this sort of distance that I think people want to keep between the fanatics, the fans, and the job you do, and it always is a bit strange as an actor to be appreciated, shall we say, in such a way. But with Dale and Ilka and Zach and Brittany and Ethan, who have their podcast, it's not been like that at all. There's so much love in the room for Titanic and for my connection to it, or anybody that they meet that has a connection to the film.
And Dale and Ilka, I might add, are two of the most extraordinarily gifted artists. Museum quality reproductions.
Their creativity has been completely induced, shall we say, by the beauty and detail of Titanic, and to be able to teach yourself to sew, or be already a couture wedding designer and make Barbie-sized versions of Kate Winslet's costumes. They're just exquisite. And basically, knowing them and obviously knowing the actors was my reason for making the film. I was like, I can have actors reading their diaries, but I've got to put Dale and Ilka with their craftsmanship. And then, of course, it sort of rippled out into some other Titaniacs that we found, like Zach.
Well, no one has more personality and enthusiasm than Zach Douglas, who I had the great privilege to meet when I was in Sydney. I was there for work, and he came from Melbourne to Sydney to meet with me. And he kindly brought along so many of his collection, items from his collection, that he has spent a lifetime and a fortune amassing.
Yes, can you imagine what that's all worth if it all went in one lot somewhere? I mean, the collectors now are voracious. They'll any and all items in any way connected to that film.
And he speaks not just about his collection, but what the movie did for him, how it personally changed his life and led him to become the well-adjusted, lovely person that he is now. And he credits that to Titanic, which is
and you can see it. You can see it. I didn't see it until he pointed it out, that I think it's been that, Rose's journey, that hero's journey of triumph over adversity that you see, in the final moments of the film, how she went on with her life, and she did all the things that she would have done with Jack, but she did them on her own because of her strength of character. And it was him that gave her that power, that empowerment, if you will. And I think a lot of young people, they see it as it's a romance, yes, it's tragic, yes, it's a historical story, but I think there's a really strong message there that you can achieve so much if you put your mind to it, or if you have somebody to help guide you in that way.
And one Titanic-generated romance that did not end tragically was one of our highest-rated YouTube episodes. Talk about meeting Roberto and his partner.
Well, Roberto and Rolf that were actually at the Royal Albert Hall for a live Royal Philharmonic performance of James Horner's score to the film, and I was there filming. I wanted to get sound bites from people, and they were there, and they had brought props from the film that they had. They were wearing their Titanic t-shirts, and then after the fact, Roberto contacted me. He said, "You do know that we met on a Titanic Facebook group, I think, and struck up a conversation." They've now been partners for 8 years. They had, Roberta has a beautiful collection of props. Rolf is a historian, so he, really lent into the truth, the historical facts. It's a fantastically balanced partnership. And then these lovely moments, they talk about how they quote the movie to each other all the time. How couples, Drew and I have vernacular, we have repetitive jokes that nobody else gets or cares about, but their repetition and their jokes are all Titanic related, which I think is so charming.
We met Pablo Ohana, and I'm trying to remember what road led us to Pablo.
Instagram. Yeah. He watched Ship of Dreams, and well done. Thank you so much. What a great little movie, and also he and I are, you know, talking about making event screenings with readings, or even maybe a museum tour of some of the props.
Well, he worked at the museum in Belfast,
So
and
he's
what's
in that
amazing
world.
is our conversation with him turned political. I mean, as he lived there. I mean, he moved to Belfast for that job, as I recall, and he has such interesting things. If you do the deeper dive, if you treat yourself like Robert Ballard and decide to do a deeper dive into these things, discovering more about Pablo is fascinating, because he's very politically active. He has great passion for Eurovision. So it's fun to find out what the other interests besides Titanic our guests have had. And he's so smart and so charming, and I really enjoyed that. And now it's the gift. Titanic Talk has been a gift because it's opened these other doors for us.
Yes, yes, we are definitely going to go to Titanic Belfast and do a podcast from there. That
I
has to
can't
be.
wait for
That
that.
has to
I
be
can't wait for that.
on our list.
And we talked about the idea of Titanic kids for a long time, and about how people that weren't even born when the film came out are Titaniacs themselves. And our Titanic Kids episode with Brandy and Neil, that struck us. It was such a happy surprise, because I was like, all right, how are we going to make a podcast out of this? And, you know, we started talking, and it makes you feel like the future is safe with nice, smart, young people such as them.
Yes,
They,
well,
them,
young people
those
who are
two.
interested in history and true story, and in Brandy's case, inspired to become a filmmaker, like a little bit like Fabian, our cinematographer in our documentary. He was not written into the script
Yeah.
of the documentary, but in the nature of documentaries, you always find something you weren't looking for. And Fabian, we have to get Fabian on a podcast. Actually, it's reminding me that you know
Yeah.
there's still so many people.
Season two.
Season two, darling, season two.
Yeah, there's no end to it. And someone who knows all about that too well, who actually told us we could take a hiatus, was L.A. Reid Beatles, who has her own successful podcast of Unsinkable. And boy, she invited us to be guests first, and boy, was I delighted to reciprocate, because she was so charming and she's so smart, and now she travels the world as a sort of ambassador for Titanic, and she's so speaking of deep dives, she's so fascinated by historical minutiae that you wouldn't find in other places.
Yes, but she's still a tried and true blue
Fan.
Titanic fan. Yes, yes. She. I think I got one of the greatest compliments of the entire time for the film, when she said after watching a screener we sent her that she was sobbing and sobbing. I'm like, oh my God. She said, no, because I felt so heard. That I've been this, not so much closet Titaniac, but I have loved this film and been teased about loving it for all my life. And now to learn that there are other people all over the world that have responded just like I have, it just really just touched her, and that touched me, because again, a little unexpected little unexpected feedback from the film that we were actually saying it's okay to really love this movie.
And she really loves Leonardo DiCaprio. You know you're a fan if you can sit through Hanging with Leo, the documentary that I did back, I don't even know when that was, in the late 90s. And she was very charming. She sent me.
It's on YouTube. It is on
yeah,
YouTube.
oh boy, is it on YouTube? I get mercilessly knocked for it all the time. Hanging with Leo, but you know, hey, it was a moment in time. I was early in my career, and I was happy to chat.
Absolutely.
So when we talk about the spin-offs, one of our brightest historians, William Brower, he's super fan, super educated, super organized about all things Titanic. Great to talk to him, a wealth of information. Where else would we have met him?
Well, yes, because of Titanic. Yes, absolutely. And one of the most charming stories he has is every anniversary he has a ship's bell that he rings at 2:20. Is that the time it actually sank?
Amazing.
And he just I watched him this year. I watched his video, and it really is moving to see somebody not directly connected to the story, but who's still clearly so connected to the story. Like,
I just couldn't make it till 2:20 a.m. unless it's a bathroom break, because it's not going to happen.
well, there's also, is it 2:20 GMT? Is it
True.
ship's time wouldn't have changed on the transatlantic voyage? Because I looked into that. I was like, what is the time? What was the actual time in what time zone? But I think he does it in East Coast time. And talking
Fair
about
enough.
connections, what about Simon Medhurst, who is not only an author, but why is he an author? Because he's the great grandson of Quartermaster Hitchens, who was at the wheel when the iceberg.
Which he didn't even know until later in life. Like, can you, like,
Oh my gosh,
it just goes to show you should do those little DNA kits. You just never know who you might be related to. And his book, the 300 Day by Day of Titanic, and I love his Instagram, Titanic Memorabilia. I don't know where the underscore goes because now I'm subscribed to it, so it just pops up.
Yes.
But boy, he is a vast resource of anything Titanic related. And I bought the book, and I love his book. It's a very proud addition to my Titanic bookshelf.
And he goes all over talking to schools, and yeah, he's made it like not his life's work, but it's a very significant hobby. I don't want to use the word hobby because that sounds like it's much more than that. And they found his gravesite and put his great grandfather's gravesite and put a headstone because he didn't have a headstone. It's
his grandfather would be proud, so proud of him, because his grandfather took a lot of abuse for being at the wheel. You know, there was a lot of criticism of the crew, and you know, yet the crew, especially the ones that survived, because then there's the whole thing of like, oh, well, how come so many of the crew survived? They were real heroes in rescuing people. You have one historian who also is a great part of your documentary as well, thanks to Titanic Honor and Glory.
Oh, James Penker. I know people listening to this will be very familiar with Titanic Honor and Glory because it's the most exquisite digital rendering of the ship, and I don't think they'll ever be finished, because even though the detail is so exquisite, you know, that every corner of the ship is their ambition to make so that you can literally experience walking through it like a virtual reality experience. And James is not only I would say he's the creative director, so he steers that ship with all these digital artists, but he's also a performer and a musician, and he's played Thomas Andrews a couple of times, and you know, he's so connected to this story in such an extraordinary way. But they gave us images and fly-throughs of the ship, and every time I see the opening credit sequence of my film,
goosebumps.
That beautiful fly through the grand staircase, it just, yes, I could weep with joy. It's lovely.
Yeah, it's a real gift. Speaking of walkthroughs, I met Michael Martin, gosh, the late 90s. I was doing an Irish show. I was in Ireland, and I'd heard about the Titanic Trail, which was a walking tour you can take in Cove, Ireland, and see the last place that Titanic was docked before she sailed off for the last time. And Michael is he's such a wonderful ambassador, not only for that part of Ireland, but the Titanic's Irish legacy as well. Really interesting. And I'm glad to see that it's still flourishing since I was there in the 90s. It's bigger than ever now.
Well, and he's, again, somebody he was in the Navy himself. So he was a mariner, and now he's managed to sort of turn all of that into what's his life's work, which is preserving these spaces, these places where the last 120 Irish people stepped onto the ship. Yes, we're so lucky. Who else do we have? Who else?
Gareth Russell. Now this was funny because an author friend of mine, Anne Seba, who has written just some marvelous biographies of Ethel Rosenberg and Wallace Simpson, the women of the French Resistance, Jenny Churchill. I mean, she's quite an esteemed and talented author. And we were having breakfast when she was in New York, and she says, "Oh, you have to meet my friend Gareth Russell. He'd written a book on the Queen Mother, but he'd also written A Ship of Dreams, not connected, but of course similar. The Ship of Dreams book, which I immediately ordered and devoured. And he is such a his skills are so broad as a historian, but he obviously has a passion for Titanic. And what I loved about his book was his affection for Thomas Andrews, to the point of where the character of Thomas Andrews in his book was referred to as Tommy, because that's how most people addressed him. And what a family man he was, and how devoted he was, not just to his job, but to it really humanized Thomas Andrews for me, and such a pleasure to talk to Gareth.
Oh, wow. Have we reached the end of our list?
We have 2 more to go.
Go on.
Greg DiNapoli, another artist who just just his love for the design of Titanic, and that's what was fascinating to me.
He used the word architecture. Yeah. Yes.
He looked at a lighthouse, and as he said, it was something big and shiny that attracted him as a child, and that's what he wanted to draw it. He was interested in the design, and the same thing with skyscrapers, and then the next thing you know, Titanic. And now his work is
Titanic before he became an artist, and really self-taught. He said YouTubers taught him, but he did not go to art school. You look at his, I almost said photographs. You look at his pencil drawings, and they are so photoreal. They look like photographs. He said they are mistaken for photographs.
And his connection to Ken Marshall, the famous Titanic artist too, and how he was inspired by Ken. And obviously so was James Cameron, because so many of those beauty shots of Titanic are really directly off of the Ken Marshall portraits. And finally, there was Dr. Samuel West, the creator and curator of the Museum of Failure, which I thought was just brilliant. It's such a hilarious and brilliant concept to have a Museum of Failure that would include things like the DeLorean or a Linda Evans electric face mask, but to put Titanic in there.
The Google Glass things.
And Titanic, which caused a great deal of controversy for him, that he was including it as a failure.
But we learn from our failures. Because Titanic sank, we now have to have, the law says you have to have enough lifeboats. There are all sorts of laws that came into being because of this huge tragedy that I'm sure.
And not to speed through an ice field. And if you do, take your binoculars.
Yes. So, a failure, yes, but for future successes, the humans have to learn the hard way sometimes.
Well, Alexandra, if all those years ago in 1996, if you hadn't asked me to give you a hand with your audition for James Cameron's Titanic, we wouldn't be sitting here. Then again, if you hadn't made your beautiful documentary and invited me to participate in that, we wouldn't be sitting here. And then to market the documentary, we came up with Titanic Talk, and now it has its own place in the entertainment stratosphere. So I thank you for being my co-host and co-creator of this, and we're going to just gather up our resources for season 2, and let's take it on the road.
Yes, take it to sea, Mr. Murdoch.
If you've enjoyed this podcast, please leave a review. And if you'd like to hear more podcasts like this, hit the subscribe button. For information on where you can see Ship of Dreams, Titanic Movie Diaries, go to shipofdreamsfilm.com. Titanic Talk is a production of Ship of Dreams Film Limited. At Titanic Talk, Nelson and I are looking for the ultimate superfans. Do you have a passion for James Cameron's Titanic or any of the other screen adaptations? Are you an amateur historian with a vast knowledge of the ship herself? We would love to invite you on our podcast. Come and talk Titanic with us and all things aboard the Ship of Dreams. To reach out, email info@shipofdreamsfilm.com. We look forward to hearing from you.